Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 1st of July, 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So we have the official Sepolia testnet merge announcement here from Tim Byko that you can go check out. This was published, I believe, yesterday, and you can go kind of like check this out for all the details and I guess all the links to everything you need, such as clients and things like that. And on the Sepolia note here, for those of you who have been paying attention over the last, I guess, like 24, 48 hours, I did say that we expected Sepolia to happen sooner than, I think, July 6th or 7th was the original kind of like date because there was more hash power that came onto the network. But that hash power has disappeared overnight, basically. And I'll show you, I'll bring up the website here. I should have got it up before, but bring it up here. This is the website that people use to track this. So it's bordal.wtf. You can see this chart here that kind of like plots out the journey to TTD, and you can see how volatile the hash rate has been on the Sepolia network. And then if you scroll down a bit, actually you can't really see it because of maybe if I zoom in there, like you can see that kind of like hash rate chart here. My camera is blocking it, but you can see the hash rate spiked up, right? And then it's just gonna kind of collapse today and it's leveled out again. So it was gonna happen, I believe, tomorrow or something like that, but it doesn't seem like that'll be happening now. So you can see here, to achieve the TTD at this kind of like date, then this is the gigahash that's needed, but this is when it will reach. So right now, based on the current hash rate, TTD will be reached on July 5th here, which brings me to the next thing I wanted to talk about, which was that live stream that I mentioned yesterday that I'm going to be doing with the ETH Staker crew here. It will be hosted on their YouTube channel. There's a link here to kind of like set a reminder on YouTube. I'll link this in the YouTube description for you. But as I said, it is quite hard to know when this is actually going to take place. We can get an estimation like what happened with Ropsten, but the problem is that they're not going to be changing the TTD, they being the kind of like core devs or anything like that. They're just going to let it happen because there's just too much screwing around. So if that hash power comes back online here on Sepolia, well, then it could happen faster, or if more hash drops off, it could be slower. But the target is kind of like July 6th here on the Wednesday, but currently it's Tuesday, July 5th at this time. I'm assuming this is UTC. I think, yeah, it's UTC time here. So yeah, not sure when that's going to happen. We'll keep you guys updated. I have a funny feeling what's going to happen is that, like, while I'm sleeping, for some reason, there's just going to be a lot of hash that hits it, and then I won't be awake for the kind of like stream here. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen, but still, go and kind of like set the reminder here for the stream. I'm hoping that it happens when I'm awake so that I can actually join and be part of the stream. But as I said, it's kind of like hard to know. And this won't happen on mainnet, like when we do the mainnet merge transition, because of the fact that there isn't just one entity that has like a huge amount of hash power that they can put on and, turn on and turn off, right? It only happens on the test nets because the test nets just have such a low hash power to begin with. It's basically, I think, 1,000 times lower than mainnet or something like that. No, I think the last calculation that I did was actually like 1,000,000 times lower or something. So just crazy difference. So this is not going to happen on mainnet, but it is something that we have to deal with on the test nets. Yeah. But anyway, I'll link this in the YouTube description. You can go check it out for yourself. So we have a great thread from Bartek here again today where he asks the question, can you always withdraw your funds? And he lists a bunch of different protocols out there of funds that you can kind of like withdraw from. So with MakerDAO's delegate contract, you can. Binance and Celsius, you won't be able to always withdraw your funds. As we've seen, Celsius just disabled withdrawals because of kind of like a bank run. Binance could do exactly the same thing, right? Compound and Aave most of the time. Maker Vault, yes. DYDXV3, yes. DYDXV4, question mark, right? And then Bartek goes into like this thread basically describing what can happen on each of these services, how you can actually withdraw your funds, who can stop you from withdrawing funds, and all these sorts of stuff here. And I highly recommend giving this a read. But this is something that falls into a lot the kind of like topic that I talk about a lot, which is risk, right? Like when you're putting funds into anything, there's always more of a risk than just kind of like holding the funds in cold storage, for example. So putting your funds into Maker, I would consider to be low risk. As you guys know, I'm a pretty heavy user of Maker when I kind of like want to take on debt or want to take out. I mean, I don't leverage trade. It's more just kind of like I want to borrow against my ETH or something like that. Maker's the first stop shop for me, and then I consider Compound and Aave to be low risk as well. But Binance and Celsius, Celsius I always considered to be extremely high risk because just like there were too many red flags for me. Binance, look, I mean, Binance has been around for a while. It's a pretty legit centralized exchange, but it still carries with it a lot of risk. Like, your funds could be frozen for any reason. Like, it doesn't even have to be part of Binance, I don't know, becoming insolvent or running with people's money. It could literally just be that your account gets frozen for whatever reason and it stays like that. And it's very hard for you to have any recourse here with that sort of stuff there. And then as for like something like DYDX, I mean, this is going into layer 2 territory, right? Where we talk about escape hatches and being able to withdraw your funds to layer 1 if the layer 2 goes rogue and things like that. Most of the layer 2s don't have escape hatches, I believe, yet. They will, obviously, but they don't have them right now. And there's no kind of like really nice interface that you can use to exit or anything like that. It's kind of like, it has to be done through the contract if it exists. But that's just due to, I guess, like it still being early days. But that is kind of like the way it is here. So you can give Bartek's thread a read for more of a kind of like deep dive on these sorts of things. But it's definitely something people need to be more aware of, need to be paying more attention to, especially in the wake of Celsius going down, right? BlockFi also having troubles, a bunch of other services having troubles that were kind of connected to that, and all the fallout from 3 Arrows Capital, and then also the Terra fallout. Like it feels like over the last few months, it's all just come at once, and it's really opened people's eyes to the fact that, wow, you should take your risk management seriously. And even if people have a lot of money, doesn't mean they're actually necessarily doing proper risk management. Like, you would think that 3 Arrows Capital had way better risk management than what they did, but apparently they didn't. And then you would think that all of these lenders would have better risk management than what they did, and they didn't, again, right? So never assume that there is kind of like risk management happening for you. You need to be your own manager of your own risk. You can't just kind of like outsource that to other people and other organizations and expect them to do what's best by you, because at the end of the day, if they're in trouble, they're going to look after themselves. They're not going to look after you. They're always going to look after themselves first, and then maybe worry about the customers later. And the customers really, in kind of like events like what happened with Celsius, they're never made totally whole, right? Like, if Celsius wants to get themselves out of the hole that they dug, they first have to get themselves out of it, and then they can go to in whatever way they can, and then they can worry about their customers. Because at the end of the day, the company is on the hook for the funds, right? The customers aren't. So that's the kind of like first priority there. And same with like 3 Arrows Capital, for example, right? Their first priority, I guess, if they want to kind of like fix what happened, is paying back the lenders, but they don't have the money to do that. So they have to kind of pick and choose which lender to pay back. And then those lenders lent that kind of like money out, and then they've got people that they've borrowed that money from that they have to pay back, and they have to kind of balance that as well. So there's all kind of like forms of risk management that goes on, but you need to manage your risk before something bad happens. There's no point doing it after the fact. Like, doing it after the fact is kind of like, oh, well, we lost all this money. Let's start managing our risk now to make sure it doesn't happen again, or to make sure we can fill this hole. It's like, well, if you just managed it properly to begin with, you most likely wouldn't have ended up in this hole, right? So it always puzzles me when people just take risk management or don't take risk management as seriously as it needs to be taken. And it doesn't just go for centralized lenders and places like that. It also goes for individuals interacting with different DeFi protocols, interacting with different smart contracts in general. You always just need to be aware that as soon as you put your funds into a smart contract, guys, there is more risk associated with it than holding it on your own kind of like EOA, they're called, externally owned account, or your own wallet. Vastly more risk. But then there's also nuance to that, where depending on which wallet you're holding it in, there's more risk associated with it. Like if it's a hot wallet such as MetaMask, obviously there's much more risk in that than just holding it in kind of like a Ledger or a Lattice or a hardware wallet, for example. But then it depends how you secure your seed phrase, and that could be risky because you didn't secure your seed phrase correctly, and all these sorts of things. So definitely something to keep in mind always. I think it's not supposed to be an afterthought. It's supposed to be something that's always on your mind. You're always considering, and it's not just got to do with crypto itself. It's got to do with anything you do on the PC that you interact with crypto with, especially if you're using a hot wallet of any sort. Like, being mindful of which programs you install, being mindful of which website you go to, being mindful of kind of like who you let access to your computer, being mindful of other things like your email being compromised and stuff like that. A lot goes into these sorts of stuff, guys. And at the end of the day, the services can try and help you. There are services out there to help you. There are kind of like protections in place for, say, Gmail, for example. They have their own protections in place for preventing people from accessing your account and things like that. But it's still your responsibility at the end of the day. If someone gets access to your email account, you can't just go to Google and expect them to make you whole. Like, that's just not going to happen. You have to be responsible for that at the end of the day. But anyway, going to leave that one at that. But this segues me nicely into something that happened today on what got to do with Polygon and Phantom. So the public RPC gateway provided by Ankr for Polygon and Phantom were compromised via a DNS hijack earlier today. The Polygon and Phantom Foundation have no control over services provided by others. Use Alchemy or others while this is fixed. So I've talked about RPCs before and about how you can use a bunch of different RPCs, and there's plenty for like all the different chains out there. But this particular one that's being provided by Ankr, that's ANKR, got nothing to do with Terra, but provided by Ankr for Polygon and Phantom, was unfortunately DNS hijacked, which means that DNS hijack essentially means that when you're kind of like pointing out to something, or where you're kind of like talking to something, you're expecting to get kind of like the correct thing back. Like for an RPC, you're expecting to be able to relay your transaction and everything to go through smoothly. But instead, what happened because of this DNS hijack, the attackers were able to inject kind of like this arbitrary text into people's kind of like when they hit this RPC into their MetaMask or something like that, and then kind of like direct them to something to somewhere to do something nefarious. And I think there's a screenshot here of that somewhere, I believe, of what it actually looks like. I'm not sure, actually. No, I'm not sure. There doesn't seem to be a screenshot here, but I'm sure you'll be able to see this flying around Twitter here. I'm just going to scroll through and see if there's anything going on here. No. Oh, apparently more information has come out about this as well, that Gandabar changed their customers' email addresses without their approval. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Like, this has just happened like a couple of hours ago, so I'm not going to try and kind of like do a full breakdown. And I think this account, yeah, here we go. This account, CIA officers who shared this. So you can see here, this is what kind of pops up. This is the RPC error that'll pop up and say, you know, funds are at risk. Restore your wallet at polygonapp.net, which is a scam website. Do not go to that website. And that will basically ask you for your seed phrase. So this is one of the more sophisticated attacks, I guess, out there, and one of the more kind of like subtle things that people don't really talk about. But it falls into what I was saying before about the fact that if a website ever asks you for your seed phrase, just don't put it in there. Like, it's just, especially one that you've written down on a piece of paper from a hardware wallet and that has never touched a computer, just don't. Like, the rule of thumb for a hardware wallet seed phrase, or for any seed phrase really, is to write it down or to secure it in some way offline that it's there, it's secure, it's resistant to things like fires and stuff like that. And then never, ever input it into a kind of computer that's connected to the internet, ever. And even if it's not connected to the internet, just don't. Because one day you might connect it to the internet, and for some reason, there was a keylogger on your machine, and then it kind of like speaks out, and then your seed phrase gets compromised, and you thought you were safe, but if someone has your seed phrase, they can take all the funds from your hardware wallet anyway. It doesn't require you to physically sign those transactions or anything like that. They can kind of get taken out because they have control of your wallet. So that's a good thing to keep in mind, a good rule of thumb there as well. But don't, I guess, like, just use common sense at the end of the day. Like, I think people kind of like get scared sometimes over security, and they're like, oh my God, there's so much to think about. But really, it's just common sense. Just like you don't cross the road without looking both ways because you know you're going to get hit by a car. The same kind of, I guess, like instinct should trigger when you go to a website and the website's asking you for your seed phrase. You should be like, well, no, I'm not going to give my seed phrase because that is essentially the same thing as getting hit by a car, right? Except for your finances. So yeah. Anyway, this is a developing story about the Polygon and Phantom RPC here. But yeah, it's not a great thing to happen, and hopefully not too many users have been affected by it. So I forgot to cover this the other day, but there is this kind of project that I invested in a little while ago that I really want to talk about today. So it's called Macro, and they kind of like announced their public launch on Twitter on June 24th here. So basically what Macro is a boot camp for Web3 builders, essentially. That's like kind of like the very high level stuff, but they do more than that. So they're kind of like doing, like, you can see here the TLDR of what they do, but like the top of funnel is like macro engineering fellowship, you know, learn basically how to develop in Web3, learn how to work in Web3, and kind of like graduate from that, and then kind of hopefully get a job within Web3, right? That's the top of the funnel there. And then there's other things that they do, such as audit. So they basically sell audits to, or I guess do audit services for all types of projects out there. They have talent as well. So they have like a talent agency where you can kind of like hire the Web3 talent that comes out of the engineering fellowship here. And they also have a ventures arm that's coming soon that will obviously invest in projects. So it's kind of like reminds me of the Y Combinator kind of model, but for crypto and for Web3. And they've had a lot of success. Like as I said, I'm one of an angel investor, so I get their investor updates. They've had a lot of success. They're just kind of like getting lots of people through their courses. They're getting lots of audits done, and it's just really, really cool to see something like this because it's very different to what I think we're typically used to within crypto, of obviously these on-chain protocols and things like that. Whereas this is actually training the kind of like next kind of Web3 builders to go and build these protocols themselves. So this is kind of like the front door for people to get into it. So if that's you, if you're interested in doing something like that, definitely check out Macro here. You can go follow their Twitter account. I'll link this in the YouTube description below, and you can read the rest of this kind of thread here as well. But I think this is one of the better kind of like services to use if you're trying to upskill. Like there's plenty of obviously blockchain courses and Web3 courses and stuff like that out there today, but I think that most of them are really just kind of like generic stuff. They're not really kind of like up to date with what you need to know when you're in kind of like Web3 and working within Web3. And I've also talked about how I think working within Web3 is like half basically the kind of like hard skills, like the technical skills, and half kind of like soft skills such as the culture. I really do think that the people who know crypto Web3 culture will have a much easier time working within the industry than those who just don't know it. So I think that's what Macro can give to you as well. Now, this isn't kind of like me trying to shill you too hard on this sorts of stuff or to like a paid advertisement or anything like that. This is just me being excited about something that will educate people. Like you guys know, I'm an educator. I love educating. And I think that this is just a really cool structured way for more people to be able to build within Web3. So definitely go check this out. I'll link it in the YouTube description. So an interesting tweet here today from JCRTP, who is a blockchain engineer at Rocket Pool. So he starts the tweet off by saying, for those who have been following me in the Rocket Pool Discord server for a while, you know I'm obsessed with setups that can validate the beacon chain with under 10 watts. Today I'm excited to share some news on that front. And you can read this thread for news of this, but I think this is really cool. And again, this speaks to just how cool the Ethereum staking community is because it's full of hobbyists. And hobbyists don't just want to do kind of like the run-of-the-mill stuff. They want to see how far they can push things. And being able to validate on the beacon chain using a very low power device, under 10 watts, is a noble goal. And apparently it can be done, right? If you look through kind of these kind of threads here, you can see that last year JCR kind of demonstrated this where they used a Raspberry Pi, and it uses 5 watts and performs very well. It was an overclocked Raspberry Pi. And in the past few months, they've been working on a developer prototype for a new board called the Rock 5B, which you can kind of get more information about here. So this board basically has 8 CPU cores, 16 gig of RAM, a full PCIe 3.0, and 4 times slots for NVMe SSDs as well. So, and apparently it's about 4 to 6 times as fast as the Pi, on par with most NUCs, and validates using, you guessed it, 5 watts of power. So that's really, really cool. The fact that it's on par with most NUCs, which are these kind of like Intel NUC things you can buy, and they're little boxes, little PCs that people like to stake on. Well, this is on par with it. It's 4 to 6 times as fast as the Pi, and it only consumes 5 watts of power, which is really, really cool, especially for people who just want to be able to validate without chewing up too much power. It's awesome. So definitely check out this thread here. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for more information about this. But this is what I love most about the hobbyist staker community, is just projects like this where people actually go out there, they do something different. They don't just kind of do the run-of-the-mill stuff where they build like a normal PC and just let it run and don't worry about the energy usage. Because at the end of the day, like one of the, I guess, motivations to moving to proof of stake from proof of work is because we're trying to use, as less amount of energy as possible. And to that end, doing staking with these devices, with these really, really low power devices, is one way to kind of like achieve that. So very, very cool to see this. I'll link this in the YouTube description. You can go check out the full thread below. All right, so this was an interesting thing, and this basically speaks to what I kind of like talked about yesterday with regards to Arbitrum, but I put out a screenshot on Twitter where I said, Arbitrum's block space was more valuable than Bitcoin's yesterday. And it's a screenshot of the cryptofees.info website where you can see that Bitcoin block space has $260,000 of fees, whereas Arbitrum one block space has $478,000 of fees paid here. Now, obviously that was because of the Odyssey event, and obviously it wasn't ideal for end users because of the fact that fees went up and the Odyssey event had to be paused and all that sort of stuff. But I want to talk more broadly about the concept of block space here, because it's one of the things in crypto that interests me the most for a number of reasons. And I think the main reason is simply because it's very, very difficult to fake block space usage, right? Because it's expensive. Like, to fake block space usage on basically any network except like the ultra cheap ones, it would get very, very expensive very, very quickly. So, for example, on Arbitrum 1, if a swap is costing you $1 and you want to fake 100,000 swaps, well, that's $100,000 in just fees. Now, depending on what exchange you're using, if you're using Uniswap, you're then paying the exchange fees as well. So, it tallies up very, very quickly here, as you can see. So, to that end, I think that it's just a really, really great way to show chain usage and show block space demand, because at the end of the day, layer 1s and layer 2s, they sell one product, block space. Now, block space demand is how we measure the popularity of that product, but also there's a lot of nuance here. As I said yesterday, Arbitrum 1 is throughput limited right now. And the thing is, I should clarify this when I say throughput limited. All chains are throughput limited if they have a fee market, right? And it just depends how much throughput they can get out of their chain before the fees start going up. Nothing has unlimited scalability. Not even fully centralized services in the Web 2 world has unlimited scalability. And there's different ways that we can scale, and there's a bunch being worked on. But right now, Arbitrum 1 could process more than what they are doing, but they were throughput limited for a number of different reasons. And obviously, Nitro is coming to help with that, and a bunch of other upgrades as well, I believe, especially for other layer 2s out there. But because of that, this fee revenue on Arbitrum 1 is obviously not sustainable. It happened due to Odyssey. It happened due to the fact that it was throughput limited. I think it was on average doing like 10 TPS or something like that, and that meant the fees went up, and that was kind of like an outlier. So you really want to look at block space demand over time, and I'm not talking over weeks or even months. I'm talking years to kind of get a good picture of what block space actually has lasting value. Obviously, I think the only block space in crypto that has proven to have lasting value is Ethereum block space. Because if you look at Bitcoin here, it just has hardly any demand for it. The demand right now for Bitcoin block space, all that fee revenue that you see there, or at least most of it, would come from arbitrage of Bitcoin between different centralized exchanges, basically. I don't see any other reason why people would be using Bitcoin. Bitcoin is something that you buy and hold. If you want to spend it, then you probably are going to spend it on Lightning Network or something like that. I mean, that's what they say. I mean, in practice, it's different. But hardly anyone is using Bitcoin for commerce. So when you look at what it's actually being used for, it's mostly got to do with centralized exchange arbitrage, and people kind of sending to and from exchanges as well to, buy Bitcoin off an exchange, withdraw it to their wallet. That obviously costs a fee, or send Bitcoin into an exchange and all that sorts of stuff. Now, the most dangerous thing here for Bitcoin is that the fee revenue has been dropping over time, and long-term, Bitcoin is going to rely on fee revenue for its security, because the Bitcoin block rewards go down over time, right? Every 4 years, the Bitcoin block reward halves, so fee revenue is supposed to make up for that to secure the chain. But it's just not happening that way. The block space demand, it's all in competition with one another, and not all block space is created equal. On the Bitcoin network, you cannot do what you can on the Ethereum network, and just by virtue of that, the Ethereum network's block space is more valuable. Same with Arbitrum 1. You can do whatever you can do on Ethereum on Arbitrum 1. Same with BSC even, Binance Smart Chain here, right? Same with Polygon, same even with Avalanche and Optimism. You can do much more with those networks with their block space than you can with Bitcoin. So I don't want to pick on Bitcoin too much here, but the thesis that you can survive off fee revenue on a network like Bitcoin has always been fundamentally flawed to me. It doesn't matter how popular Bitcoin got. If it's trying to be a digital gold that you kind of hold and you don't really do much with, then where's the block space demand going to come from? Who's going to be buying and selling Bitcoin block? Sorry, who's going to be buying Bitcoin block space? Not selling. Obviously, the network sells the block space, but who's going to be buying it? I just don't see anyone, right? And then people will say, oh, Lightning Network, and then settling back to Bitcoin, all this sorts of stuff. I was like, yeah, but the thing is, the Lightning Network doesn't really do many transactions on layer 1. And the Lightning Network itself is very flawed and has abysmal adoption. So whenever I see this, I'm just like, this is just crazy to me that the Bitcoiners would stick to wanting to secure the chain with fee revenue when it's been shown over the long term, as I said, over years, that the fee revenue is going down. It's not going to be enough, and kind of like Ethereum and other smart contract chains is just eating Bitcoin's lunch in the blockspace department, because you can do so much more with it. It's kind of like, if I had to use an analogy, right? Like, think about how many things you can do with a smartphone as compared to a dumb phone. Like, a million more things. Well, are dumb phones around anymore? Yeah, in some capacity. Do many people use them? No. Like, no. Not even, older people use the dumb phones anymore. They were like the last adopters of smartphones, and they all have smartphones now. So when you kind of like think about that, it's the same kind of concept. Bitcoin is this old kind of like thing that doesn't really do anything as compared to Ethereum. So why would you use it as block space? You wouldn't. So anyway, I don't want to pick on it too much, as I said here, but I think that when talking about block space, you need to look at the yearly trends more than the day-to-day or week-to-week or month-to-month trend. Month-to-month's okay, but I think yearly for a better trend here. But a lot of this block space demand is also tied to speculative activity. Like, obviously Ethereum is still number one, still doing millions of dollars of fee revenue a day, but it was doing much more than that during the bull market. It was doing 50, 60, 70 million dollars a day. That was obviously not sustainable at that point in time, and then it crashed with the speculative activity crashing alongside it. So if we want block space demand to be more, I guess, sustainable, we need more non-speculative applications, as I've discussed before as well. But I'm going to leave it at that. I just wanted to have a little bit of a discussion there. All right, we got a tweet here from Stani, who's kind of like teasing something today, where he's basically teased a screenshot of a phone, and he says, "What if secured by Ethereum?" So don't know what he's kind of like getting at here. It seems that there's kind of like Aave protocol in the background here. I mean, this smartphone is like one of those flip fold phones. For those of you listening, you probably can't see the screenshot. Basically, on the front screen, it looks like he's got Aave there, photoshopped in, obviously, and then on the front screen, it's got Lens protocol, I believe. And then on the bottom, it's engraved, it's got powered by Ethereum with an Aave logo. So I think this is kind of like a response to the Solana phone, right? Like, what if there was an Ethereum phone? And honestly, I don't think I gave my take on the refuel of what I thought about the Solana phone. Like, my TLDR take of it is that, okay, it's kind of like interesting that they're doing something different, I guess. And like their mobile SDK especially is pretty cool, because it'll bring more people on board. But I don't think people realize just how difficult it is to launch a smartphone and do so profitably. I believe the break even for a smartphone is that you have to sell 500,000 units just to break even, because of the production cost, right? Like, they're not going to sell 500,000 units for the Solana phone. Like, if you look at most of the smartphone market as it exists today, it's dominated by two companies, Samsung and Apple. Like, and then everything else just takes whatever Samsung and Apple don't have there. And the thing is that it's the majority, like 99% of the market's only dominated by a handful as well there. And then all these smaller players have come and gone over the years. It's very, very hard to do a smartphone, to build the hardware profitably, scale that, get adoption for it and everything like that. Software side of things is probably easier, I think, because you can just bolt it onto existing hardware. And I think building mobile SDKs is pretty cool. But I'm curious to see what Stani is teasing here. Maybe he's making a joke out about it, the Solana thing, or maybe he's just playing on it, or maybe this is actually real. I'm curious to see. As I said, I'm not really bullish on hardware plays, like the hardware play of a smartphone, but I am bullish on mobile SDK. So SDK stands for Software Development Kit. So just basically ways to make developers' lives easier when developing crypto-related things. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see what Stani's got here. And I don't know if this is going to amount to anything. Maybe they're thinking about it, but it doesn't seem like it's going to amount to anything. It just seems like a cool little mock-up, I think. All right, finally here, I just wanted to quickly shout out that I had my Twitter Spaces with Ben Edgington just a couple of hours ago, hosted by SSV Network. You can now play the recording. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. It was an awesome conversation, guys. We talked a lot about merge-related stuff and post-merge stuff, and also all the stuff that Ben does on a day-to-day basis. He's doing a lot across the, Ethereum ecosystem, and you probably know him best for his work on the What's New in ETH2 newsletter, but he also is working on an Ethereum book, and also he works on an Ethereum consensus layer client named Teku. But we go into all of that on the Twitter Spaces, so you can go catch the recording. I'll link it in the YouTube description below, but I think that's going to be it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all next week. Thanks everyone.